Hello, welcome to Tea Talk, where the topics are real, relevant, and relaxing. It's Tea Talk time, and here's Lady O.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Tea Talk. We're so glad to see you today and that you have joined us. And we have a lot to talk about today, and the relevancy of the subject matter today is one that you want to make sure that you don't miss and that you will go ahead and share um, the uh, the message today immediately with your family and friends, your coworkers, because we're going to be talking about the title is called Get Out the Vote. But before, we've been talking about Get Out the Vote, but the difference in the one today is we're going to really get you informed about what are you voting for. I don't know, have you ever had a time when you went into the voting booth and just raise your hand or just say ouch, whichever, because I've done it. You go inside the voting booth because you want to do your patriotic duty. You get in there and you're like, oh, who is that? Or which one should I vote for? Or, oh, I didn't know they were running. I mean, can we just kind of keep it real that many times we are not informed voters? And so what we're going to do today is to make sure that you are informed, that you know who's running, what the positions are, what the issues are, how to vote, how to get others to vote, because your vote or your lack of vote has consequences. And my heart has just been so overwhelmed with the mass shootings that have happened here in the last couple of weeks, with the African American community just trying to go to the grocery store, and then the school shooting with all the children that were killed, and the teachers. So voting has consequences. When someone said, well, that's not political, let's don't make it political. Well, it is political. Let me tell you why it's political. And political goes back to voting. The reason why it's political is because that young man was able to get that gun because of laws. And those laws were created by people who we put in office, who we vote in office, or who we fail to vote out of office. So our vote does have consequences. So when you put people in office, just know that these are the people that are, it's kind of like, do you remember, let me give you this example. When someone gives you a power of attorney on, like when they're getting ready to die or they're going to be out of the country, and they give you power of attorney to sign just like it was them. Well, when you send people to Washington or Austin or to your city or wherever people have to be elected, then when you vote, you're giving them power of attorney to do the things that you want done. But what we found out here recently, and I had, I kind of knew it, but it's been really talked about here lately, is that 80-something% of Americans want the people that they voted for to have some stricter gun right laws and limitations on these machine rifles that they use in war to kill enemies. They don't want that. The majority of Americans don't want that. But because when they voted, they gave power of attorney to people who make the rules, they're doing what they want to do. So we need to know that, and we need to see, okay, do we want to put that person back in office that doesn't do what we sent them to do to office? So I'm not telling you who to vote for, but I am saying that you need to wake up. And you need to be looking at the consequences that are happening. They're just not happening. And I just want to put this little plug out there for our law enforcers. This is just my own personal opinion, but I was thinking about this. Everybody's on them about not going into the building. Well, the guy in there had an assault rifle that would shoot all of these rounds like this and kill mass amount of people and take their heads off and blow their faces up. So, if I had a husband or son that was a police officer, I wouldn't be too excited about them rushing in, because it's like they're going in to fight this war with the water pistol. I mean, their one little guns that they have, that 9mm, is not going to stand a chance against those assault rifles. So making laws not only affect us, but it affects our police officers. If we want them to protect us, we got to make sure that we're not making laws that gives 18-year-old boys assault rifles that they were more powerful than what we fought in Vietnam, our enemy. Come on, guys, it just doesn't make sense. So I wouldn't, would, if it's my child, I would want the policeman to go in there, but also if it was my husband as a police officer, I'd be like, is he going to be able to make a difference, or is he just going to go in and get blown up where I can't, you have 12 police officers who are disfigured. It's bad enough the kids are done like that, but it's a difficult thing in making on hindsight. But we want you to be proactive and make sure you get the right people in there so they'll make the right judgments in their laws. When they're picking judges who've got to stand up and pronounce judgment against us and against our children and families, we got to make sure we put the right people in there who will make sure that we are not in a situation like we're in. So people say it's not political, but yeah, it's political because it started with politics. It started with the people we put in office who were voted in. So we've got a lot to do. This year is a year when we're going to be voting, and some of the people that are in office, we're going to be looking at them to see, do we want them to come back to office, or is it time for a change? And this is the time when you have power to be able to make that change. And so we want to make sure that you are informed. So I've got some guests here today, and they're not here to tell you Republican, Democrat. They're not telling you to vote this way, the vote way. They're here to give you the facts. And if you have the facts, you can make an informed consent, okay? But when you're going in the booth like I have done before, and I know you've done it too, don't look at me like that. You've done it too. You go in there and either you say, well, I don't know who they are, so I'm not voting for them. Oh, the railroad commissioner, I don't know what he does, or it doesn't affect me. So we're going to show you how it does affect you, and how we better wake up, and we better get up, and we better get everybody that we know, and even those people that we don't know, and articulate the issues and help them to make an informed consent so we are not having to go in this direction anymore. So I want to just welcome everybody, and I thank all my panelists. So without further ado, we're going to go straight to them. We have two guests here today, and one is Angela Martin Greer, and then Eli. Eli, I didn't get your last name. You're going to have to tell me. So I'm trying to introduce yourself a little bit about where you're from. I'm sorry. What is it, Eli?
Holiday, Holliday.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Holiday. Right. Okay. Come on, Angela, get us started. Welcome to Tea Talk, and thank you so much for coming to get us ready to vote.
Well, thanks for having me, Lady O. I'm Angela Martin Greer. I'm a member of First Metropolitan Church, and I am a leader with TMO, the Metropolitan Organization.
Okay, and Eli?
Thank you for having me out today, Lady O. I'm Eli Holiday. I'm an organizer with the Metropolitan Organization, which is a union of 30 churches, schools, community-based institutions from in and around the Houston area, of which First Met has been a member since, I don't know, before I got here for sure.
Yes. Well, we are so happy to have you. And I really, we've worked, like you just said, we've worked with you guys for many, many years. And one of the reasons why I really have been involved with you guys is because you all work. That's what you do every day, is work to get the information for us, information that we're working our other jobs that we can't get. So today our issue is going to be about voting and learning who to vote for. And I know you're not giving names, but if we don't know who they are, then we're not going to know who to vote for. So as you give us the information, we're going to talk about the issues. And that's another thing. Why do you want to vote for that person? And I have done this too. I'm confessing, this is confession day. I voted for a person because I thought that name sounds familiar, or Women, y'all love this. That's a woman. I'm going to vote for her. I'm sick of these men. I've done it before, okay? So we're not going to do it again. I've done my confession. Y'all can confess y'all's too. But today we're going to learn what the issues are. Why do you want to vote for that person? Just because they got a good name? So Angela, why don't you, I know you've got a PowerPoint. We're going to follow your PowerPoint and discuss it and go along the way. If you have questions, make sure you put them in the chat. But also make sure you get somebody on, because everybody that you know needs to be listening to this show today so we can get ready to make a change for the better for our future. All right, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Lady O. As it says, get out the vote, GOTV. Every vote matters, and we need to let our voices be heard. So you can move to the next slide.
Back.
So, Eli, would you expound on what you said?
Yeah, so First Metropolitan is a member of TMO. We are ourselves a member of the Texas Industrial Areas Foundation, which is a collection of 10 similar organizations from across the state in all of the major metropolitan areas. And I like to, when people ask me what to do, I'm always kind of torn because it's a difficult job to describe. And really, what I end up on is I say, my job as an organizer really is to make the leaders, be that Lady O, Angela, other church members from other institutions and other folks like that, to make them look as impressive as they possibly can. So that when they go and they meet with city officials, when they meet with their communities, that they are people to be taken seriously. Not that Lady O and Angela aren't already, but my job really is to show people just how powerful they are when they come together. And it's an amazing job.
No, Eli, you're exactly right, because when you go into a place and you don't know what you're talking about, people can pick up on it right away. Mm-hmm. And they can just tell you anything, or just like, okay, they don't take you serious. But when you come in there with your facts together and you guys have equipped us and made us educated to be able to articulate what it is we want, and they know that we've done some research, they take us seriously. So I think you're exactly right. Okay, go ahead, Angela.
So next slide, please. So as Lady O mentioned at the top of the broadcast, that there are several issues that are important to us. And when we're looking at who to vote for, we need to look at what those issues are, as well as what their position is on those issues. So I'm just going to run through the ones on here, and then I'm sure Lady O would like to highlight some of these, and we'll have a discussion. The first one is voter suppression. As most of you know, there's new redistricting, which we'll get into later. That's the second list as well.
So
there's new restrictions.
You're coming back
okay.
to that? I'm asking you, are you coming back to that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have a separate slide on that one.
Go ahead.
The second one being redistricting, and there's a new district here in the Harris County area, District 38, which we will go into later as well. The other thing Lady O mentioned at the top of the broadcast was about the mass shootings, especially the ones that are happening in the schools, how we're going to have school safety as a major concern, as well as gun reform. Education with the COVID outbreak, there was a lot of learning loss, so trying to bridge that learning gap. With police reform, making sure that there's accountability and transparency. Mental health, making sure that there's adequate and accessible care. Infrastructure, as all of us remember, the freeze back in February of last year, as well as flood mitigation. Seems like we're having these 100-year and 500-year floods every year, not in 100 or 500 years. Corporate welfare, that has to do with Chapter 313, which we actually were able to kill in the last legislative session, but it has gained new resurgence and importance, and they're trying to put forth ways to take money away from schools. Education and workforce development, restoring and increasing funding for that. Early childhood intervention, making sure that Medicaid is available through community-based services. And then lastly, shrinking the insurance gap, making sure people that are uninsured have access to health care.
Okay. So these are very important issues that affect all of us. And if we don't put the right people in place, they're going to use the power that we've given them to do what they want to do, and it's going to affect us. And then we're going to be starting to do stuff, reacting to it rather than being proactive. Now is the time we vote to be proactive. That's Miss Lola there. Go ahead. It's popping in there.
So, Lady, are there any of these others that you wanted to highlight, or you want me to just continue with the presentation?
Let's go on with voter restriction first. Let's go to there.
Okay. So next slide, please.
Wait a minute. Go back.
Yeah, go back a couple.
Let's
There.
go to start there.
There, thank you. So what happened in the last legislative session was they put in a lot more restrictions to voting. So first of all, they make it a felony for a public official to distribute an absentee ballot application to anyone who has not requested one. If you request one, you can still get one, but they can't just send them out to everyone.
Now,
And
this
they've given
is really important about when legislation, when they met, we're talking about Texas, right?
Correct.
State, okay, the state. Okay, we're talking about state now. And
Yes,
this is
we're talking specifically about what happened in the last Texas legislative session, House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1.
Okay.
That were passed.
Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1.
Correct. And if you recall, that was when the House Democrats fled the state and went to the Capitol to try to get the federal government to reinstate a lot of the voting access that had been stripped away from the federal bill that was put in place back in the 60s, our voting rights bill.
Right.
And so unfortunately that didn't happen. And then when the Democrats returned, these are the bills that came through.
Right. Okay. So let's stop for a minute, just kind of make sure everybody's on track. So in the 60s, we got all these voting rights bills passed, am I saying acts passed to protect voters. And primarily it was minority voters and Black voters who had our rights restricted to vote from way back, all the way from slavery. They've been putting laws in place to keep us from being able to vote. And so in the 60s, we got some really good things passed. So now, fast forward in 2022, 2021, I think is when this actually went into effect. They have taken those things away, and they have, and the reason they're doing it is to make sure it's more difficult. It got to be too easy there. It got to be too fair. So now they're trying to make it more difficult, and it's not fair. So if you remember the year before we voted, everybody got a ballot in the mail, right? Now they're making it a felony for any public official to give you a absentee ballot application. So am I right on that? Because this is what I'm, from my remembering, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Lady O. And to piggyback off of what you're saying, what happened was all of those things were not in place like forever. They expired. And because when they expired, they were not renewed, that allowed the states to go back, because the way it works, the federal laws supersede the state. So once the federal certain aspects of the Voting Rights Act expired, the states were able to go in and write laws to re-implement some of these restrictions.
Okay.
And that's what we're seeing.
So they expired national at the federal, the national level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So when they expired when did they expire? I'm just trying to get myself educated. Do you know? Was it?
I believe some of them started. I believe some of them started expiring in the 80s.
Okay.
But
Well, and there was
the bulk. Go ahead, Eli.
Well, there was a Supreme Court case, I believe, I want to say in 2007, but don't quote me on that really kicked this into overdrive, basically saying the work of the Voting Rights Act was done, and that, southern states could now basically monitor and manage their own elections. And so we're starting to feel the fallout of that a little bit.
Right. And so I'm trying to figure out what, is it a particular, did this happen under the watch of one particular president? Or how did this happen? People just so busy that they didn't notice that it was expiring, or they thought everybody was going to play fair?
Angela, I don't know if you have an opinion on this.
Um, I don't think it was so much that no one knew at the governmental level what was happening. I think the average citizen didn't know, and didn't know that they needed to do anything about it. And a lot of people thought that these rights have been in place long enough that it's kind of going to be maintained going forward, not realizing that there was another faction of individuals who wanted to re-implement these restrictions.
Right. And so they're waiting for these things to lapse. And I don't know why they weren't permanent, but however, the fact I'm thinking that I would be thinking that they would think, well, you know, we've been doing it for so many years, it's worked. Nobody's going to want to go back to the 60s. Well, guess what? Certain people don't want to go back to the 60s, or some people do want to make America look like it did in the before the 60s. And so it's kind of a backward thing. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why you need to be aware of what's going on. And you need to also make sure you put people in office who's going to be working for you, who will not be waiting for the opportunity to take something back the way it was in the 50s and early 60s. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next point. So requiring anyone applying for an absentee ballot based on disability to submit a sworn statement that they are physically capable of entering a polling place, and require that those individuals also provide medical documentation attesting to the condition before they can qualify for an absentee ballot.
You know,
so they've again made access more limited or restrictive. And then require,
because these are people that are elderly. These are people, that's a good picture. There are people who are in walkers and, you know, with debilitating sicknesses and things that they can't stand in lines, they can't go do this. And even some of our elderly that don't know how to access or to advocate for themselves to get these forms. It's a lot of red tape. They're making it more difficult. It's kind of like the jelly bean thing that they used to have, you know, a big jar of jelly beans. Can you tell me how many jelly beans are in this jar? If you can, then you're qualified to vote. So they're making it difficult, and they're taking us back. Now remember this, I keep saying they want to take us back to make it what they thought was really, I think, a great time back in the 60s. And that's what they put people in place. They voted them in place, and that's what they're doing. Okay, go on to the next one.
And said also requiring countywide polling places in a given county with approximately the same number of voting machines as every other countywide polling place in that county, regardless of variations in population. So for instance, Harris County encompasses Houston, which is the 4th largest city in the country. So why would Harris County have the same number of voting or polling places as like Waller County, which is much smaller?
Much smaller.
So those kind of things also limit access to the polls. A couple of things that aren't listed here, I'm sure that people have heard about, which is making it a crime for you to give someone who's waiting in line food or something to drink if they're waiting in line at a polling place. Also making it so that the poll watchers can be much closer to you while you're voting.
Intimidate you is what they want to do.
The same types of things that were happening before the Voting Rights Act passed in the 60s.
Right. And, you know, when I want you to think about this, is another reason you need to go and vote, because those lines that wrap around buildings where you're waiting in line for 2 and 3 hours to vote, and sometimes 4 and 5 hours to vote, that's the reason, because they don't have as many voting machines and voting places. And they want to make it so difficult that you'll just give up. And first of all, when I see that line wrapped around the building, I got to go home and pick up my kids to the daycare, I'm not going to vote. So those are all things that are just kind of whittling away at every little thing that would bother you or hinder you or distract you or even intimidate you from voting. Because I've heard some of these voting poll people that are going to be watching, you know, they're open and carry and carrying guns and so forth like that. And they're just kind of you know, that they are against you. And they're in your face watching everything. It's just intimidating. So nobody wants to be done that. So that's a big one. Okay, go ahead.
So all of these tactics are efforts of voter suppression and, as Lady O said, voter intimidation. So moving on to the next slide, I'll let Eli go through what elections are coming up.
Okay.
Thank you, Angie. And if I can just mention one other thing from that last slide too. A lot of these things were done in response really to Harris County in the 2020 elections, because Harris County voted at a higher rate than ever before, at an absolutely astounding rate. And frankly, I think that it frightened state legislatures to see Harris County vote in such high numbers. So there are parts of SB1 and the new voting restrictions that are pretty clearly designed specifically to disenfranchise voters in Harris County. They limit practices that were very successful in the county, and they enumerate the things that made the voting drive here so successful.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because that's the reason why we're having all this voter suppression stuff change and be so drastic, because they got scared of what they saw in the last election. They had to making everything so convenient. You could drive through, you could register online, not online, you can do your ballot, mail-in ballots. They had more polling places over, the hours were longer, early voter registration was longer. They've shortened those hours for early registration. I don't know if we're going to still have a drive-in 24-hour. And this is so important for, I would just say, the working class, because a lot of people work in the service industry all day long, serving people. They don't have time to get off early to vote in before 6 o'clock. They work. And so for it to be open 24 hours, those things were so great. And they didn't like it because the turnout was really, really great for voters. And they realized that, so they sought to undo that and make it more difficult. You need to vote. Go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, Lady O. And this is an important election. So every 10 years or so, there's a census across the country, which I think this one happened a few years ago, actually, but it's just now sort of getting put in place in terms of the electoral rolls. And when that happens, there's a lot of seats up for office. So the governor, the lieutenant governor, the land commissioner, the railroad commissioner, every single state senator, every single state representative, all the Supreme Court justices, all county judges, regardless of where you are, all county commissioners for precincts 2 and 4. I'm sure that I'm missing some. But the point I'm trying to make is, all congressional seats, as they are every election. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, this is a huge election.
Get your cell phone and take a picture of that guy, so you'll know who is up for re-election, what their name is, and who the current person is. As we go over the issues, you want to look at to see, this is their proposal for what they want to offer to us. And so do you want to keep these same people to do some more, or would you like to see maybe a change? That's up to you, but you need to know who they are. So take a picture with your cell phone so you'll know who they are. Go ahead.
That's all I have on this slide.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide.
There we go.
Okay, so the governor. The governor is if you think of the president of the United States, the governor is basically the president of Texas. Okay. The chief executive officer of the state signs bills into law. He has to, if we want to override a veto, you have to get 2/3. He's responsible for the National Guard. He's responsible for a pretty huge chunk of the way that state level money is managed. And he is responsible through sort of a weird backwards way. He appoints people that sit on executive committees. And one of those committees is the Public Education Committee. So we have the State Board of Education, which are people that sit on it. But most of the decisions that actually get made on that committee are made by, I don't remember what the actual title of the guy is, but basically the chair of that committee, who is appointed by the governor. Okay. So the governor is the most powerful person in the state in terms of political power.
You know what? You did a good summary there. He is like the president. So a lot of times people say, Deborah Frederick said, Lord help us. But he is like the president of Texas. And so he has a lot of power. And the biggest thing too, we talked about is he's appointing people and committees that he appoints, and you know who they're going to agree with or to vote on. They're going to be voting on things that he tells them to vote on, or else they will not have that position. We've seen that in our national, well, it's the same way with state. So he signs bills into law, allows a bill to become a law without signature. He has a veto power. He can override some things. And then what is that last one? The 2/3 votes of the House and Senate. My screen is small. Oh, there it is. Okay, a veto can be overridden if the bill received a 2/3 vote in the House and Senate. Well, we have our government in Texas is set up to where we're in trouble, okay? And that's why the representatives were going to Washington. They were legally trying to avoid signing these voter suppression bills into law. But as soon as they came back into the city, into the state, then Governor Abbott and his team was there to make sure that they went into law. So it tells you that even though you put certain people in office, your favorite person, it still does not guarantee that they will have any power to stop what the governor is doing. So,
and to add to that, Lady O, also in that particular instance, those congressional members were threatened with being arrested had they not returned, or when they did return, if they did not return to Austin,
right,
in order to take their seat to vote.
But
the other thing with the governor, as Eli mentioned, he does appoint people to various committees. He also, if you remember the freeze and everyone getting on ERCOT, it's also the Public Utility Commission. He appointed the people on the Public Utility Commission.
Right.
So you have to look at, when people are making decisions, as Lady O mentioned, who are they making decisions in favor of? A lot of times it's who puts them in those positions.
Yeah, so appointed them. Okay, let's go on to the next. We got a lot of issues here. This is so good. Okay, so that's the governor. You want a new president? You want the same president? Okay. Dan Patrick, what does he do?
Dan Patrick is the lieutenant governor, and I want to say that the lieutenant governor is a lot like the vice president, but frankly, the vice president of the U.S. is not a super powerful position, and the lieutenant governor can be a very powerful position. One of the ways, and this is less important as time goes on, and especially when the governor and the lieutenant governor are like generally in accordance on things. But when the governor is out of the state, the lieutenant governor is in charge. So if the governor has to go to Washington to testify before something, or if he's overseas doing a conversation with some foreign dignitary about bringing business to Texas or whatever, Dan Patrick is the boss. Dan Patrick fulfills all of the governor's duties. He's also the president of the Senate. So if there is a tie in the Senate, he is the one that breaks the tie. He is often, though not always, the one who sets the agenda for what goes on the list of things that the Senate votes on and the list of things that they consider. And importantly, with Dan Patrick specifically, and I don't know that this is true always of Lieutenant Governor, but certainly it is of Dan Patrick, he's a member of the Legislative Redistricting Board. So when we talk about redistricting a little bit later, a lot of this, Dan Patrick was the architect, or at least an architect of.
Okay, very good. Very powerful. Okay, the next one, he's up for re-election too. If you want to freeze and all that stuff, but we haven't had any results from that, change from it. But I know they appoint and they know who's over these. They were not panels. Anyway, the freeze, the responsibility went back to this office, and we haven't gotten anything resolved from it yet that I know of. Speaker of the House.
So the Speaker of the House is Dade Phelan. He's from Beaumont. I'm not sure if there's anyone who votes in Beaumont on this call, but he is an important person to highlight because the Speaker is the one that sets the agenda for the House. He sets the agenda, so he decides what bills and what propositions make it to a floor vote of elected representatives, and he decides who sits in the various committees. And what that means basically is, if you ever hear in a movie about, or if you're watching like a political documentary or something about something making it out of committee, before they go to a floor vote, usually propositions or potential bills or what have you will first go before these committees that are each responsible for a small subsection of the state law. So you can have like the appropriations committee, which decides oftentimes how money is spent. You could have like the land commission, the agriculture commission, etc. And before they make it to the floor, they usually go through committee and they get changed based on what's going on in the committee. And it's the chair of that committee who oftentimes is responsible. And it is Mr. Felon who decides who sits in those committees and who chairs them.
And so he's only for Beaumont. So if we're in Houston, we can't vote, but we do have a lot of family members. Is that right? We can't vote in Houston for him, but we can share with our family members in Beaumont.
Yep.
Okay. And we've got pictures on there too. Thank y'all for putting those on there. Oh, okay. So he's up for re-election. That's very powerful. And I like the last part you said that, think of him as a coach. He decides who gets to play, who can't play, who's going to ride the bench, who can even make it into the game to try to play in the game. So if we can't get in the game, we're certainly not going to get any points or get anything in our favor if we can't get in the game. All right. What do we have next, guys?
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, which I'm sure y'all have seen in the news recently.
Oh, yeah.
He is the chief law enforcement officer for the state. So he's the one who's supposed to be enforcing the laws. He represents the state and state officials in legal matters. He issues opinions. He oversees collection of child support, administers the Crime Victims Compensation Fund, enforces the Open Records, Open Meeting Act, and he approves public bond issues and enforces consumer regulations. So you can see he has his hands in a lot of things, but he is basically the chief law enforcement officer for the state of Texas. So you have to look at the laws that are in place, look at how those laws are being interpreted. And that's what you want to keep in mind as far as who you want to hold that position. It's a 4-year term and he's up for re-election.
Okay, let's break this one down. Is he like the police chief or is he like the mayor of the, I'm trying to understand this one a little bit more. He's the chief law enforcement officer. Does that mean all the laws that go forth, he is the one that makes sure that they're done? Can you break that down a little bit?
Well, he's the attorney general, so you have to look at it like he's the one that's going to be deciding for the state how the laws are interpreted and how those laws go forth. Eli, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think, this position is sort of, this position can be a little bit difficult to explain. I think Angela has done a great job. He is the chief law enforcement officer, right? So he decides the ways that laws are enforced and interpreted, and he often takes over high-profile cases. So, for example, this is kind of a very political example, but you hear a lot right now about the Trump administration being sued by, or former President Trump being sued by the New York Attorney General. So the Attorney General's office has decided that this is a case that they want to pursue. So he is the one who's responsible for making decisions like that.
Okay. Now that's very good because I know the lady that's in New York, Attorney General, she's decided that, yes, we're going to take this case against Trump. Well, if it was something against Cruz or against somebody else that we were filing a lawsuit against in the state of Texas, then he would make that decision whether or not to take that case or not. Mm-hmm. So it seems like when you break a law, then he's the one that rules on it.
He's the one that decides whether or not to prosecute it.
To prosecute. That's the word I'm looking for. He's the one that decides whether or not to prosecute or not. Yeah. And so even if that person is wrong, if they are in his friend, or I'm just using this as an example, if it's his friends or if it's something that he is in cahoots with, for lack of a better word, mm-hmm. then he doesn't have to take it. So all the things that happen that are wrong, even though it may be wrong, he gets to decide whether or not we prosecute or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And I saw someone put in the chat, it's almost like a district attorney. It is a lot like a district attorney because the district attorney is only over the district, whereas the state is over the state. So Ken Paxton is over the whole state of Texas, not just one district.
Wow, that's real important because a lot of things that they're doing in the state of Texas, if he's got the final say so on it, we're in trouble. Okay, we could be in trouble. I just looking from the past and what's going on now. All right, what's the next one?
Next slide, please. Is the Texas Controller of Public Accounts, Glenn Hager.
Mr. Hagar. Okay.
Okay.
So on its face, this is a very, very boring position. This guy, it's more complicated than that, but very basically, this guy is the state treasurer, and he's the one who's sort of loosely responsible for economic development. So TMO and our statewide network, we have a little bit more experience with Mr. Hagar because we became involved in a fight around Chapter 313 of the tax code in the last legislative cycle, which, Anja, do you want to explain a little bit?
No, you can go ahead.
So Chapter 313 is this, or was rather, it's dead now, was this program that allowed companies who were going to create jobs in Texas or who were coming to Texas to file for a tax abatement through school property taxes, because Texas really doesn't collect that many taxes, and what they do collect is mostly property taxes.
Okay.
So it allowed companies like Exxon or Tesla or whoever to file for school property tax abatements, which the state government would then reimburse the local school district for. So, for example, Beaumont has a bunch, right? If Exxon wanted to file for one in Beaumont, they said they were going to create all of these jobs. They would then say to the Beaumont school district, we don't think we need to pay these taxes. Do you agree? They would come to an agreement, and then the state government would reimburse the Beaumont school district for that difference. And it was an extremely expensive program to the tune of about $1 billion a year, money that was coming from the state government that could have gone to public schools. So we were involved in a program to kill that last session that was nonpartisan. We had people on the far right from the Tea Party, and we had people on the far left from environmental groups, basically saying, we think this is like, there's no accountability here. There's no recording of how many jobs are created. It's sort of mystical how all of this happens. And why are we taking money that could go to schools? I know HISD specifically, were that money repurposed towards schools instead of corporate property taxes, would have received $20 million a year for 10 years.
Oh my God.
I know, it's a huge amount of money. So we killed it. Hagar is an important position because as he's sort of winding up his term, he tried to gut that program in the final leg to say, you don't need to report anything. So to remove all accountability from these corporations that are taking these property taxes. So while you and I have to file our property taxes or file our taxes and do every little nitpicky thing, otherwise the IRS will get after us, Glenn Hagar was like, yeah, but companies, they can just like hand wave it. Like they can just, sign a piece of paper. I'm getting kind of mad as I talk about this. I don't know if you
Right. I'm getting angry too as I'm hearing you talk about it. It's kind of really understanding, and I'm going to make sure our guests or our people that are watching are understanding this too. So that way, we're going to break it all the way down. So pretty much, because I know in Sci-Fair, we were really trying to figure out, why is it we don't have enough money? Where is the money? Where is the rainy day fund? Where is all this money that the schools are supposed to be getting? And why aren't the corporations in the community paying? It didn't seem like they were paying their fair share, but I couldn't quite put my hand on it. So what you're saying is that corporations could file and say, hey, ouch, I don't have that kind of money. This is unfair. We don't have the money, so we're not pay those taxes. So they don't pay their taxes. He makes a decision. Okay, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Send me a note, send me an email, whatever. And then they'll go back to the school district and say, y'all got to come up with more money. Because how does that work?
So basically they'd file. So I know my biggest form of taxes are, and I'm happy to pay them, is the local school district. Whenever they issue a bond, whenever I have property taxes, it's the local school district. So basically the state would reimburse the school districts for giving these companies tax abatements. I would say, if I could just say it very simply, because I know we don't have a ton of time.
Please just keep it.
Just very, very simply. I know I've already complicated it. Very, very simply. Chapter 313 means that common folks like you or I or our neighbors are paying taxes for ExxonMobil and Elon Musk. And that those people do not have to show the same level of accountability that we do.
Mhm.
So we're paying taxes for them?
Yes,
Mhm.
Why
we're
would we be
subsidizing
paying
their
for
taxes.
them when they're
Right.
so wealthy? Why would we be doing that?
Well, if you ask the state, it's because it brings business to Texas. But study after study after study has shown that they don't really create new positions. So
It sounds like the rich is getting richer. I don't know. That's kind of what it sounds like to me, because we need our taxes, okay, and we're not making very much, and so for us to be having to compensate and helping out a big corporation,
Mhm.
I don't get that, because our kids need it in the school system. The school districts are really hurting because of not having enough funds, so they're going to get it from somewhere, so they're going to get it from the taxpayer. And they're always saying, we're for the taxpayers, but really and truly, this doesn't sound like this is something that benefits the taxpayers.
mhm.
Okay, we're getting kind of close, and I'm thinking about this, y'all, and I don't know. You think we could do a part 2 with the issues next week, or we could record it another time? I don't want to rush these positions of the people who are running and what they do. You think we can do the record maybe on a Zoom call, the issues, and talk about the other part of it? Because I don't want to rush it. You think? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go and talk about, so now we're talking about who's running and what do they do and how does it affect you? Okay. So go ahead. What's the next one?
Okay, next slide. So it's the Texas Commissioner of General Land Office, and that's currently held by George P. Bush. So this position manages state lands, including oil and gas properties and the Alamo, chairs the Veterans Land Board, which administers programs for Texas veterans, and is responsible for environmental protection of the Texas coast. And other state boards chaired include the School Land Board and the Coastal Coordination Advisory Committee. So this position is responsible for land, whether it's dealing with oil and gas, whether it's dealing with veterans, whether it's dealing with the coast, just all encompassing what's happening with the land office.
Okay, break that down. How does that affect us? Because I think people will vote when they know how it affects them. I heard veterans in there, landowners, seems like oil and gas. I always wondered, my grandparents had so much land in East Texas, and we knew there was oil there, but I don't know if they have some way of that they got the oil shipped across the way to somewhere else, but we didn't like the Beverly Hillbillies, our oil didn't come up on our land. So
well, the biggest thing here is it supplies funds to the permanent school fund.
Okay. It applies
based on the oil and gas properties from the land. So Eli, do you want to expound on that?
The permanent school fund is this big pool of money, this endowment that Texas pays into, and then that money is how the state subsidizes schools. And so one of this guy's jobs is to figure out and manage how much oil property taxes, how much of that money and how much those properties are worth goes into that school fund.
Okay, so they can say mine is only worth $200 and somebody else is worth $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They make that's a lot of power.
Right. And based on how they assess the value determines how much taxes they pay as well, and how that money goes into the permanent school fund. So there's several steps there where we're impacted.
Okay.
So when the schools are looking for money, some of it is coming from this permanent school fund.
It's not the rainy day fund. I keep asking about that because that's all I keep hearing. There's a rainy day fund that we can never, it can never start raining enough for us to get any of the money. But that's not what we're talking about, right?
No, that's not this. But yes, there is a rainy day fund.
Okay. Anything else in there y'all want to, or is there another person that's up for? Let's try to finish those. We have 13 minutes, so
There's two more individuals that we want to kind of go through.
Okay.
If I can just add really quick to Mr. Bush's his purview too. After Hurricane Harvey, the federal government gave the state a bunch of relief money to help after that disaster. And Harris County, to my knowledge at least, has not received any of that money.
Right.
And he's the one who's responsible for that.
Is that because he refused to take it because of the stipulations? Is that the one where they offered it to our state? And I remember that. They were offering all this money to the state of Texas, but you had to abide by their laws. And they said, we don't want that money because we're not abiding by those laws. But it affected Texas because the money was for us, right? And so we couldn't get what we needed because of the people we elected to say yes or no, whether or not we would receive it.
Well, and it includes too that Texas, so that's true. And also Texas did receive some money that surrounding counties and surrounding areas have seen, and Harris County has not seen, despite the fact that, in my opinion at least, Harris County was probably the most hard-hit area in the state by Hurricane Harvey.
Wow. Okay. That's how it affects you guys. Okay. Everybody's affected by Harvey and some of the other things we've had happen. So that's who's making decisions. Okay. Very good. All right. Next.
So Eli, if you can go through the railroad commissioner.
Yeah, just very, very briefly. Railroad commissioner is an extremely misleading name. Basically, these folks are in charge of the oil and gas industry in Texas. And it's difficult to say how exactly this affects common people other than one important detail. And the important detail is that they are the ones, largely, not entirely, but largely, they are the ones that are responsible for gas utilities and the pipelines that froze.
So the gas lines and pipelines that go across the world, is that what we're talking about? He's responsible for where they're put and how they're maintained and so forth.
Well, and even the facilities where we take that sort of gas and it gets then shipped out to different houses and stuff, they manage, I don't know what percentage of those they manage, but they manage a pretty big chunk of those.
Okay, so we all have to deal with gas. Yeah. And I'm looking here, his is a 6-term year term. So you need to really look at him and see if you want to keep him or move, because it's going to be another 6 years before you have the opportunity to revisit, whether or not you want to keep him or whatever. All right, next one.
So the next one is the Harris County Judge. And again, this is a title that's a little misleading. Is what she does. She presides over the County Commissioners Court, which deals with budgetary and administrative authority over the county government operations. So basically what she is she's like the mayor of Harris County. She's responsible for calling elections, for posting election notices, receiving and canvassing election returns, for civil defense preparedness and disaster relief. And I'm sure y'all can recall during Harvey, during the flood, during the freeze, she was holding press conferences with her staff as well as other key leaders with regards to what the county's response was going to be in these disasters. So this position is very important. It's a 4-year term as well. And
let me
you just need to keep that in mind.
Yeah, let me ask you something about her as well, because wasn't she the one very much responsible for making sure we had all of the wonderful things we had during voting time? This is what I heard. Is that something that she would be?
She and Mayor Turner fought for us to have those things, and it was really up to Chris Hollis, who was the county clerk at the time, over the voting, as far as making sure that we had drive-through voting, 24-hour voting, extended voting hours, and all those things. But she was instrumental in making sure that that was a part of what Harris County had available. Eli, was there anything you wanted to add on that?
No. She's so in the same way that the governor is to the president, she is to the governor. So she is our local executive.
Okay. And I know that she's been in the paper a lot here recently, and I wonder if it's something legitimate, or is this something to get her out because they could not, because of her stance of standing with the mayor and making sure we had good voting rights, because I remember all the press conferences that the mayor had on some of the things to help with voting. And so she was right there and she was very supportive of that. So if you're one of your issues of you want to make sure that we do have good voting things and people who speak up for us with making things easier and not more complicated, that's something you want to look at her. I don't know who her opponent is, but we probably do need to look at that and see if we want to keep her, especially if you have an issue with voter suppression, or if we want to get someone new. Are they going to do a better job of helping us get our voting rights back? Or are they going to help us in losing our voting rights? And I think that you definitely need to have the right person. Because I think they want her out, and I wonder if there would be something that you all know legitimately that why they want her out. She seems to have done a great job. I don't know.
I don't know that I can comment on that one way or the other.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Nonpartisan, but I'm really wanting, and then we will talk about this because as we go on, because we need to know what people stood for and how can they go and get that information to figure out what did they vote for, what did they stand for? Because like if my big strong thing that I want is to have strong voting rights, okay, how do I go and figure out who it is unless we just have an open discussion where you're not representing TMO, you're just kind of representing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing is you can always check their record as far as anyone that's in office, their voting record on how they voted on various bills or legislation.
So you're saying each one of these people that are up for election, you can go and check their voting record?
Well, it depends on what positions they have. Some are more accessible than others as far as if it's something that's up for a vote. But basically, the best thing to do is, pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to where people stand, what their positions are, how they're received or not received, and where that's coming from. And that'll give you an idea of the legitimacy of what's being said.
Wow. Well, listen, guys, there's so much to talk about because there's so much to learn because there's so much we don't know and understand. But one of the things we want to do here on T-Talk is make sure that you know it and you understand it so that you can be an informed voter and you can be an empowered voter to make a change once you realize what the person stands for, if they're not for the issues that you want to give power of attorney to when they're going into their offices to vote. When we're asleep and they're discussing us, are they representing us? Or are they representing someone else? And so your vote does matter. Your vote does have consequences. And so next time, tune in because we're going to talk next about the issues. What are the issues that we're facing that we really need to be aware of so that we can see how do those people vote on those issues? How do they think about those issues? Did they vote the way you wanted them to? Are they thinking and making laws and rules and putting people in places that help you or hurt you? That's what we're going to talk about next time. And then we're going to also, always give you where to vote, how to vote, and to get that, make it easier for you. So join us next time, guys, on T-Talks. Tell somebody, send this information to somebody and tell them, hey, next week they're going to be talking about something even better. So don't miss. We'll see you next Sunday at 3 for tea with Lady O. Thank you for joining us.